morning, and welcome to today's virtual user group to discuss from a high level how to address security, compliance, and governance in this ever-changing world. And we'll give everyone a few moments to come into the session from the waiting room. And while we're doing that, we're going to have a quick poll just to see where you are in the planning stage, because that'll help drive some of the conversation about when we're talking about some of the current themes and topics. So we'll just give everybody a few moments. And we're going to give it another 5 seconds. So if you want to answer that, this is your chance. All right. We'll go ahead and let everybody see where everybody's coming from. So we have a pretty good mix of where when it comes to planning. So let's kick off the group. So my name's James Allen. I'm a senior product marketing manager here at Smartsheet. And I'd like to extend a warm welcome to each and all of you for attending this first group for compliance and risk management. And we plan to have these on a quarterly basis on an ongoing basis. And so today, just going to the next slide. We first need to address our legal slide. So essentially, there's some information that could be brought up that's going to be forward-looking information. And really, the point of this slide is to let you know that there could be some dates or changes or product features that might be touched on that might not be something that could be changing. And if you want to go to the next slide. And so let's go over today's agenda. So we'll be joined here by our panel today. And then they're going to share their different stories and where they're coming from. You're going to hear an introduction from CORTAC Group. And then you'll hear some perspective from our panel. And we'll be taking questions throughout. So if you look at the bottom of your bar, there's a Q&A button. And if there's a question that comes up anytime, feel free to ask a question at any time, and we'll be addressing those. And just as a heads up, we'll try and answer those live, but if we don't get to them live during the group, we will be following up after the group. And then we'll be ending promptly at 11 a.m. Pacific. And if you want to go to the next slide, JP. So if you guys would like to introduce yourselves, JP.
Yep. Hi, JP Patino from CORTAC Group. I manage our partner channel relationship with Smartsheet and some client delivery.
And Ricky.
Hi, I'm Ricky Waldron. I'm a manager here at Smartsheet on the compliance and corporate security team. Going through some of the solutions you've made as of today.
And Justin.
Hi, Justin Weingartner. I'm the Director of Public Sector Security over at SAP, focused on the Concur product lines. My role is to support the product and business org in achieving public sector ready products.
Awesome. And if we can go to the next slide. And so I'm going to hand it off to you, JP.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, James. And thanks for letting us kind of co-host this conversation with you today, and really looking forward to chatting with Ricky and Justin to kind of get some perspective. As I said, my name is JP Patino. I'm the Director of Partnerships, Client Success at CORTAC. Objectives today for us are really to share a little bit about CORTAC, our role as a partner with Smartsheet, and then talk a little more broadly about this perspective on compliance management and how it relates with Smartsheet. Real brief on CORTAC Group. We're a management consulting firm. We have a national presence, but a big market is here in the Seattle area. So a little bit about what we do. CORTAC's been around for about 13 years. We have a long history of helping companies break into new sectors, whether that's public sector, going after new markets, new geos, and winning and maintaining federal contracts. What we realize is that as companies win these huge deals, it can be transformational for them. $100 million, even $1 billion grants and deals that they win, the amount of scaling that's required is immense. And so as a consulting team, we can help companies scale. We've launched new programs and products with our clients. So, and within that area, we specialize in a few different areas. So our collaboration team, which is really tied to our Smartsheet offering, really helps companies create those business processes, that help them deliver. We have an analytics and insight group where we're pulling data from a variety of sources and helping visualize that to make better decisions for organizations. And then lastly, as we've grown and seen kind of this changing market, especially with companies that are in the federal space, we recognize the need for a compliance offering. So we have a regulated business advisory group that helps companies navigate controls and requirements and builds, security solutions with customers to help improve the quality of their security and compliance programs. So as I mentioned, we're a Smartsheet partner. We've been a Smartsheet partner for the last 3 years. We've won awards with them. We've done a lot of complex builds, whether that's control center or multi-tier. It's worth mentioning that we partner very closely with the professional services organization. We will collaborate oftentimes on engagements. We train with them and alongside them. And so we stay very close to the product as it continues to change. One of the other ways that we work hard with Smartsheet is trying to bring innovation and thought leadership, to what we're seeing in the market that's applicable to Smartsheet and its customers. And so, that we can all, have the value of that thought leadership and all, create value for the ecosystem that we're kind of in as a partner. And with that, that really led us to this conversation today about seeing a need for compliance and security and the opportunity that is there using a product like Smartsheet. So I'm going to take a couple of minutes to just set the table on why we think this conversation is important. And then we're going to get into kind of the panel discussion. But really, this is just to level set, all of us on this high level conversation. I will say, I won't claim to be an expert by any means. There are people on this call, probably also in the participants, that know way more details than I do. But I hope that, from CORTAC and the folks that we, work with, we can provide a perspective that I think we can all get some value out of. So first, compliance in this context is really the monitoring and ensuring that companies are meeting security standards, right, that are regulated either by government or internal IT or other entities. And what we see is then, number one, why do we have compliance? If you look at any recent headline, you'll see there are data breaches, mishandling of data, everything from Equifax to SolarWinds, MGM Grand. It's become so commonplace that we're probably becoming a bit numb to it. Compliance in itself is intended to improve our security systems, right? To get them to behave as they should and protect the data and the people behind that data. And when it's not about that, it's just a bunch of box checking, and that's not the intent. So to paint the picture on the challenge, compliance is incredibly complex. We talk to, security analysts and security architects all the time and realize that it is a million different decisions that have a bunch of, variables in them and different sources of data and details that have to be tracked, addressed, and configured the entire time. And to make it more complex, the regulations are increasing, right? Federal government, as well as other entities, are continuing to pass regulations to help us improve the quality of security and prevent those types of data breaches and security threats. And you can look at the introduction of CCPA in California, as well as the Department of Defense push for CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model. And that continues to grow with other agencies adopting that one. So recently, Department of Homeland Security has adopted that, and GSA. And what that means is that all of those companies that are involved with any of those agencies will need to comply with the CMMC as a part of their contracts. The bottom line is that you have an increasingly complex challenge for organizations, right? Companies need to figure out how to ensure security, become compliant to be in business or win new business. So I want to dive into a little bit more of the details here of that business scenario and those business challenges to kind of paint the picture. And we're going to talk more with Justin and Ricky to get their perspective on this too. The challenges and scenarios that we see in compliance are you're tracking a policy document that's written in one department and needs versioning updating. You have a security scan that takes place in one tool, or a vulnerability scan that takes place in one tool, gets downloaded and uploaded into a system of record. You have controls that impact everything from tracking citizenship to data handling practices across departments. And a lot of compliance teams are tracking these things from email, Teams, or Slack channels into that system of record. Compliance teams and organizations need to be able to collect that information and input their parts so that collectively organizations and leaders can make decisions. Now, unfortunately, there's no tool that solves security or automates it all away. And many of the tools available on the market specifically for compliance can be cost prohibitive to try and collaborate outside of a compliance function, right? Which is what is needed. And what we find is that the amount of collaboration is what's really challenging, because you're working across different functions throughout the organization to enable that collective decision-making. And this is where we think that there's a huge opportunity for security and compliance to utilize collaboration work management platforms like Smartsheet for these types of business challenges. So when companies have adopted a platform like Smartsheet broadly because of automated workflow, being able to visualize data, all of that can facilitate the collective decision-making that compliance programs require, right? This is where the technology really helps us organize and collaborate so that people can do the higher level thinking and do their jobs. So the stories and use cases that we're going to dive into today, more with SAP Concur, with Justin Weingartner, and with Smartsheet, Ricky Waldron, are in that vein of facilitating collective decision-making, enabling automation and tracking, and collaborating across functions throughout the organization. So with that, Justin, you ready? So Justin, we have had the pleasure of working with your organization, CORTAC Group, implemented some of the solutions and tracking and automation tools that you use in public sector security. So firsthand how these tools can enable that collective decision-making. Maybe give us a little bit of a better sense of your responsibilities within compliance. What's top of mind for you in your organization?
Yeah, like I said, I support the product and the business organizations in achieving public sector ready products. But what that means is you've got to know what the gaps are and get them remediated and get your product into a compliant state and then shepherd them through certification. So what really keeps me up at night is connecting the chains of interdependent compliance and control processes and the information which traditionally center around Excel spreadsheets, emails, tickets, plus those manual processes we use moving that data back and forth in and out of tickets and in and out of spreadsheets. I really appreciate what we've been able to accomplish by creating sub processes within different Smartsheets using workflows in order to make them go from one process to another, and then iterate over time and building out new ones.
Yeah. Yeah, that iterative process is really key and on any of this when you kind of take on new compliance programs. I'm going to get to the next slide, which these are a couple of the areas that you use Smartsheet for within your org. I talked earlier about kind of collaboration in these compliance scenarios, and Justin, you've been around. You're a former Army officer. You've led security teams. Can you talk a little bit about collaboration across functions? Like, what is that like for you and what you've seen in your career?
Yeah, I guess the key for it is you need to be able to share information. You need to be able to share information with the right people. You need to be able to protect it from the people that don't need to have that information. And that's just been key to how we drive these and meeting the intent of the user. So like, for example, you've got an example up of our tracker for the clearance process. Like actually asking to go into an environment requires a request. It requires a clearance process to be granted, which requires paperwork and follow-up. And the end users there are the user who wants to get access to environment, and their management who wants to know, are my people cleared to do the things they need to do? Well, that traditionally means emailing us, emailing the ISSO, emailing the customer side to say, hey, where are they at on these processes? We've managed to automate that step by step, so we can send out notifications, be proactive, say, have you completed this? Do a little bug mail, a little emailing to say, have you done this step yet? Have you done this step yet? So that way we can quickly respond to managers and say, yeah, this person's on this step, this person's done, and get that information, the important information, back to them in a quick amount of time so they can manage and do the things that they need to do.
Yeah. So automating the permissioning, getting the right people to see the right information at the right time, right? These are things that you'll use, and just as an example, right, like dynamic view, work apps to kind of manage some of these processes.
Right, that's key to it, because we only want the information to go to like a new user, collect what you need to from them, right? So we'll use a form for that. All they see is a form, the fields they filled out. That goes to our spreadsheet. Our cleared individuals can see the bulk of the information and pass it to the next step. And then you need to create a list of, okay, IAM team, here's your list of people who have access to it. You flow from one workflow to another, but only the people who need to see the information are able to see it. And we use those dynamic views, like you said, for that.
Yeah. And then I think the other piece is, right, that's all in the same platform, all kind of within that same process. Yeah. We've talked a little bit about this use case in particular, and you mentioned this before, right? The government clearance tracking. Maybe talk about the attributes of like using some of those tools, what that gives you. And then I think the other thing is how scalability kind of plays a role for you as you're thinking about your scenarios.
Right. So compliance requirements keep increasing while often resourcing is pretty static, so scalability is key to success. We've gained multiple customers and not additional resources in order to support those customers. So what does that mean for us? We need to have a process that's robust and automated enough that one or two individuals can keep it running. And this has been key to that, right? If we didn't have tooling set up around the alerts and the notifications and walking people through the steps, that's actual people hours to do all that contact and follow up on those emails and go do the research and bring the information forward.
Yeah, right. And you said resources stay static. You need a process that's robust enough and flexible enough to be able to bring people in and even scale just some of the assets you're tracking or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah. All right. I want to invite Ricky over to kind of jump into the conversation. Ricky, maybe elaborate a little bit on your role and kind of what's top of mind for you. What do you wake up in the morning thinking about?
Yeah, so at Smartsheet, I kind of manage the public sector compliance, kind of what Justin touched on, but also taking care of the commercial side as well, the SOX and the ISO of the world. So I've got a lot of compliance requirements on my plate as well as doing the actual corporate side of the world. So making sure governance, we talked about policies a little bit ago, risk management, everything that kind of sits in the G, the R, the C. My team, we kind of manage that on the Smartsheet scale. And as Justin said, we're a smaller team. So we need to make sure that all our processes and procedures and communication is centralized and not missed because it's siloed in one location. So obviously, being at Smartsheet, we use our tool to try to manage, communicate, and stay on top of all this throughout the year.
Yeah. So what's the business scenario that you see a great need for collaboration or more connected reporting?
Yeah, I mean, I always say that compliance is kind of a translator for the company. You're working with so many different parts. You're working with HR, you're working with facilities, you're working with engineers. You need to be able to take very generic requirements that are, you have authentication. Okay, what does that mean to a physical security manager? And then what does that mean to your engineer? So you're taking those and communicating them out and then collecting evidence or communication or descriptions of that control back, and you want them in a centralized place. You have one control given to you by an external regulator, but it is assigned then out to multiple groups. So you want to be able to align still to that one control while you're getting HR and facilities and engineers giving you different answers, and you can track that in one location and follow up where needed and understand where you actually already compliant in another section. So that's a big, as you asked earlier, something that keeps me up. A lot of people say, I'm scared of risk, or my thing is, did I remember to communicate the change for this process to HR? Oh, did I, NIST is going from Rev 4 to Rev 5. Have I even looked at it yet and let the engineers know they need to, add another character to the password? So that's kind of the thing that keeps me up is, are we communicating? Are we letting the business succeed by giving them enough information?
Yeah, it's right. Like I was saying before, it's the million different details that are all being tracked and coordinated. And as you said, sometimes translated across various departments. Is this something that where the opportunities arise to try and bring others in, have people look at, hey, this is the screen. Like, is there a lot of the education that you have to do, or do you feel like you can run faster, kind of with a single platform?
Yeah, and obviously I have, my team has the privilege of everyone in the company knows the tool and understands the tool. So when we roll out a new process, a procedure, a sheet, something like that, it's very minimal how much we need to communicate them on how to use it. We put in automation to communicate things. We give them a lot of information via the way that we're communicating our request. And so usually the questions are more compliance related or security related. We don't have to go in and say, please attach it here, or thanks for the email. I slacked you something. Can you make sure to put that in a repository? There's not a lot of back and forth. I can request something during an audit, and then I can, one click later, I'm requesting a vendor for some evidence, and then another click, and all of a sudden I'm doing a continuity exercise. It's all in one place, and compliance and security is kind of this ecosystem of where one thing changes in one, it's going to affect downstream everything else that you do, changing risk, changing scope, all those kind of things. So having it in one location for us makes it easy to say, someone on my team changes something, they don't need to tell me. I get something that already notifies me that then I can do my process.
Yeah. Kind of one central location where the project is being managed. Yeah. I want to jump into, we talked about, Ricky, in past conversations, we talked about a couple of areas that you get questions about a lot, right? And the first one is the quarterly access review. Maybe talk us through this. Why is this process such a difficult one to collaborate on? And how have you been able to simplify it and scale it.
Yeah, and the QAR has a soft spot in my heart. It was actually the very first thing I was ever given in the compliance world. This is how I got into it, and from there, 15 years later, I still know it's hard to perform any sort of access review at any sort of scheduled basis. And what I find the risk, the process at the very beginning is very difficult. Identifying scope, communicating out to data providers to get that initial data pull, getting all of those in one place and normalizing it, communicating then to a manager or a reviewer to say, here's everyone you need to review, here are their entitlements, their permissions, their access, communicating that to maybe 10 people, maybe hundreds of people, that they know what they're doing when they go in and click approve, or is this role correct? I don't know what this role means. Can you give me more information? There is a lot of manual work that's historically been there, or various avenues to receive that data. You're getting CSVs, you're getting spreadsheets, you're getting screenshots, you're getting someone screen sharing. How do you get that? So we've used our system to be able to do every step in the process and track that in an audible fashion. So if an auditor or a regulator, someone came in and said, how do you know Ricky put that in? We can easily show that exactly the second that Ricky put that in there. And that helps in the entire process of, I got to get database pulls and physical security log, all these kind of things. We can put it in one place and be able to work on that. So being able to track the process through a single tool at the end, be able to also track it all the way to closure as you disseminate any changes or anything. It makes it easy for us to stay on track and not have to overly communicate or check our emails over and over again to make sure someone has responded.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that you kind of said there, and I wanted to just highlight it. One of them, was tracking the historical conversation as well, right? Like when you're doing this process quarter over quarter and you're iterating on some of it to get better, the decisions you made 2 quarters ago, 3 quarters ago, like you can really know and document why we did that in the beginning, why we made that decision early on. And I think that's kind of what you were mentioning, right? You can kind of iterate as you go, but also have the historical context to stay with you.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times decisions are lost in email or lost in a coffee break that you're talking about something. So being able to go back historically and see why we made that decision, who made that decision, and how did they document or things like that, makes it a lot easier to, especially in something like an audit where maybe they're looking back 9 to 12 months. Maybe your team is completely different, but you can still, you have an idea of what happened historically in that process and why maybe it changed.
Right. And this example, I really appreciate it. I mean, similar to kind of what Justin had shared, you didn't get more resources to go do this, but the assets that you had to, inspect or kind of, review, jumped by 9 times, right? And through the same process, you were able to, still accomplish all of that.
Correct. Yeah. It took some tweaking here and there. As obviously as you take on more certifications or regulations, you have to adjust scope or adjust things. But we were able to again, not get additional resources, but just implement one additional little check, and that allowed us to scale based on a new framework that we went into. So using it, following the process, having the process there to be able to build on top of allowed us to not have to scale resource-wise, but be able to scale the actual process itself and meet any other additional requirements that come up with that.
Yeah. Okay, I want to jump to kind of this next example a little bit, which is more looking at end-to-end processes. When you're going from, okay, hey, we know we want to go after a certification, we have to do a self-assessment from where we're at to, okay, how do we go and achieve that certification? And I know Justin and Ricky, both of you have experience and talked about this kind of end-to-end process. Justin, I'm going to bring you back in. Maybe talk about the need for collaboration here, or how you think through this process a little bit.
It's huge, right? So, just the first step alone, gap analysis, you have to go to people who either are already doing certain controls and certain compliance work, or maybe they're not, right? Because this is a new framework, it's a new control. You've already done a little bit of an assessment on paper, and you can tell that this is going to be an incremental add, but you still got to go to them and say, hey, you're doing this today, but what would it cost and how long would it take you to be able to do this additional set of tasks, right? And that's collaboration across all kinds of teams across the entire company. And you start with one set of subtasks, which is the gap analysis, but then that feeds your gaps, feed any kind of remediation or project plan in order to build out those controls and change your state from current state to future state. And then after that, you've got reporting. You've got internal reporting to let the CTO know your CTO know that you're on track. And you've got external reporting to let your customers know that, hey, I'm going to be on track for this certification in this amount of time. Working in the government space, you actually have to partner with the customer and work with their authorizing official. And so you have this constant open communication on progress. And you have to tie all these together. And each step of it uses different information, but you can actually take things from one step to the other and add new information and add new tasks to the sub processes as you go. And it's flexibility that you get with Smartsheets facilitates that, right?
Yeah.
We've worked with other tools in the compliance space. So we've got some that have taken 9+ months to roll out. Flash to bang to stand up a new process in Smartsheet is a matter of hours to days for a POC, and then like days to weeks for implementation.
Yeah.
And we can iterate on them. We can say, well, that kind of worked, but we need to change the process a little bit. You go back and tweak it. It's pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, in that, as we've seen, kind of help, supporting, whether it's at SAP Concur or just other clients that we've worked with, we recognize a couple of things. Like one, you go out and you identify that business process that you're going to go tackle, right? And you may think you have it all down before you run it, but as you run that whole thing, as you said, there is that iterative nature to it. You're going to go back and make tweaks.
Yeah, there's a beautiful saying for that in the military, and that's your plan only survives till first contact.
That's right. That's right.
Like,
yeah.
You can plan as best as you want to, but once you actually get in there and start doing the process, you'll learn things. You'll learn, oh, well, this works for that kind of team, or this needs this kind of thing, but you'll make adjustments. That's pretty easy to do in this framework. Maybe you add an extra column and add some other information and bump up the workflow a little bit.
Yeah, your plan only survives until first contact. That's great. Ricky, we've talked a little bit about this end-to-end process. I know you're responsible for leading the charge on getting some of these certifications. How do you think about this end-to-end, and how do you bring your team, the whole team, into this this process?
Yeah, so as a growing company, and as you're going after that new certification or that new requirement, it takes a lot of time to understand where am I at already against that requirement, and sometimes that's lost in an old audit you may have done, or how you can meet it going further. So you do that gap analysis. You try to understand where am I at today, and how do we need to get to certification B. You can use the analysis to understand that maybe this is a 200-page compliance certification, but after I do a quick gap analysis against our current state, we're only 10 controls away and maybe 2 modifications of existing controls. So you can immediately scope the amount of work needed. And maybe you go to leadership and you say, here's 10 certifications we want to go after. Here's hours, money, time, people needed to get there. So you kind of have a scope of work right at the beginning, and then you can collaborate with the different, we talked about the different departments in a company you have to work with. You can then make them aware of any requirements they own, and maybe they'll give their input on things. So you're getting communication from the internal teams without having to email them or corner them in the break room and ask them if they saw that email. So you're doing that, and then at the end, again, collaboration. You can have your auditor, your third party, whoever come, you can work within the same area, and they can review and give any feedback via that same area. And so you have a real time status on where are we at with the audit, where are we at with the control, where are we at with the interview schedule. All those kind of things are in one area that as my team, we manage, A to Z. We need to know for each compliance audit or each process, where are we at in it today, and what needs to get escalated, what needs to get communicated, what are we okay with. So kind of that, however many months it takes to get from scope to finish, we can run it with little overhead and not needing a bunch of different processes and communication types to get there.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I often think that for certifications or going after certifications, organizations will look at those as it's a huge lift to get from A to B, and so really what's it seems overwhelming, or how are we going to organize everybody around this, or do we how many more resources do we need to bring in, and there's a lot of uncertainty about that process. And I think what I'm hearing you say is that having these things in a central location that's flexible enough to look at different controls, whether it's NIST and translating to the ISO or whatever, being able to do a comparison and quickly understand what gaps you have is key. And I know, Justin, I don't know if you've got anything to add on that, because I think you had some experience kind of mapping two different controls in some areas.
Oh yeah, we've mapped NIST FISMA moderate with FedRAMP moderate. We have to deal with both, and they're actually different. If you Google it, there's like 200 and something odd controls for FISMA moderate, and there's 326 for the FedRAMP moderate baseline. So, and you got to educate people on that. Well, the best way to do that is to have something where you're comparing the two together, right? With ISO, SOC, PCI, CMMC is the new one. That's the next one up that we've got to do that comparison for.
Yep. Ricky, so one thing I wanted to ask is, for people who are just kind of getting started on this type of process, or they're just beginning to kind of have this plan put together, where do you recommend, where should people start? How do they get this process started in building out these programs?
Yeah, so whatever tool you have, it really starts with the process behind it. You can spend a lot of money, you can write it down on paper, but if it doesn't work for every team or every situation, you're not able to roll out a process that works for the team. So our usual first step is getting together, visualizing it, writing it, some way to say, to get to this end result, these are the steps we need to make sure we do in between to make sure that teams, ourselves, whoever's involved, will be able to succeed. And there's someone in the engineering team always tells me, if you're going to do something, fail fast. So get that down, roll it out. Guess what? It worked great with this one team. It doesn't work great with the other. I can go into the system and ask that team what works better, and then adjust for that team. Maybe they use a different language. They use a different, they use something that, I said the word authentication. They want a different, authentication can mean many different things. I can easily tweak it and then roll that right back out. And all of a sudden now that team is now in the fold. They understand, they will now follow the process. So spending some time beforehand, or using something that's predefined, like a template that Smartsheet has, those allow the user to start with something. And then if it doesn't work, great, change it. If it does work, great. Maybe it's worked for this compliance acronym. Let's now try it for this compliance acronym, see if it works. So, a lot of planning, and then as you plan, roll it out and see what works.
Right, roll out and iterate kind of as you go. I know we do want to share that template, but Justin, what kind of your answer to, hey, how do you get started? How do you start thinking about this process and program? What goes through your mind?
Like Ricky, so we live by the leadership focus on people, process, and technology in that order, right? Like you don't want to just jump into any tool and just try to make it work with a hammer. So we start by designing our process first. Then we jump into our tooling and say, okay, we've mapped out, this process needs these inputs, it needs to do these functions to it, and it needs to go to these outputs. And your outputs are what are you doing? Well, I'm trying to keep my CTO informed. I'm trying to keep my customer informed. So those are reporting requirements. That drives your need for what those processes need to do, and that drives what inputs you're going to need in order to do it. So you map it all out, get your design down, pressure test it a little bit, and then jump there in the tooling and make it happen.
Right. So business process first, kind of bringing everybody into the fold, making sure that, as Ricky was saying, hey, we're using common language and there's understanding. And that way, when you do roll this out and educate people, you can quickly pull in, folks in to iterate with you.
You hit on another key topic. Just start simple and iterate, right? Like don't try to boil the ocean or whatever terms you use, but like you start simple and solve one problem and iterate. And Smartsheet lets you take that and roll it to the next one, roll it to the next one. That kind of feeds right into the whole template topic.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's first, before we get there, hey, I just want to say, Ricky, Justin, hey, thanks for the dialogue. I think this is, I think it's helpful to get, perspectives on and hear your experience in leading these programs and kind of diving into the challenges that you see today. So appreciate both of your commentary and participating in this. Ricky, I know you have a template that, you kind of launched. You want to walk through that?
Yeah, can you see that okay? Okay. So Smartsheet, we talked a little bit about reuse or start with something. So Smartsheet has a template gallery that's available that people can go in and there's a wealth of things based on what we want to do. And what my team assisted in creating is this policy governance template. So you talked at the very beginning about managing policies and making sure approvals and communication. So you can actually go here. It's a click, it's a download, and you'll have the template set here that I'm showing. So this is in Smartsheet. This is, it's very high level and gives information about internal for any governance you have, approving policies, where are policies as of today, where is the policy, if there's a portal where you can communicate to all employees, if there's policies that live out there, please, go see them here, and here's where the newest policies are for the company. And then you have, some built-in reports that are obviously you can modify per your needs. So here we have a report just showing these are the policies that need some sort of update. They're in an annual revision. They just got some new wording. We did a minor revision. Can you please take a look? And then you can actually get approval within these reports if you want. So you can track that stakeholders or your governance committee has actually approved that policy. So this is just an idea of if you want to know where to start, or maybe it's a little bit of, I know I want to do this one process, but I'm not quite sure what to do. This is at least a baseline where you can go in and use any of these templates to get an idea of, oh, okay, maybe I haven't thought about that before. That's actually a good metric, or that's a good thing to communicate to the team. And then, you have other governance boards, you have other compliance, maybe it's as simple as modifying this image to no longer click to a submission. I'm going to click to a evidence submission for another sheet. You can use this as a base to build out other programs if it is successful. You don't have to continuously build things from scratch. You have now a base that works.
That topic of not having to build things from scratch, it really resonates, because we've multiple times now gone back and used processes, workflows that we've created, or a worksheet that we've created for one purpose. You pull it forward, make a copy, drop a new column in, adjust the workflow, and use it again for a totally different process. Like you can't count the amount of time we've saved basically being able to reuse some of the process workflow work that we've put into these instead of having to start with a blank sheet every time.
Yeah, kind of building something out and then iterating on it, right? And it's like you said before, Justin, right? Starting even small with like a template and then being able to kind of engineer that to the process that you want. James, did we have a question that?
We do. And then one thing I just want to mention is like with our templates, that's the one thing I can't mention enough is that maybe you see things here that are helpful, maybe you don't, but they're completely customizable. And there's quite a few different sets in there that could be really helpful when it comes to building out your solution. But that governance one I've used myself and it's been very helpful. But we have a great question from Andrea. What insight/experience can you provide on getting cross-functional teams buy-in and stepping out of it and getting them to step out of their comfort zone?
Any volunteers first?
I mean, what we do is it's a lot of showing previous success to teams that are maybe that need buy-in. Compliance always comes out with a new requirement that I don't have a lot of people that have come to me and said, I love this new requirement you gave us. Thank you. So you need to show you need to show success of how you're running the process. You need to communicate why you're actually performing this. You can point to controls, you can point to requirements, you can point to your risk and how you're going to mitigate it. If you show past success and you can communicate to that participant that this is why we're doing it and this is how it's going to help our company or how it's going to help our customers. It is, again, we talked about iterative. Sometimes it is an iterative process of starting slow and bringing them into the fold with other processes or minor changes to the process to accommodate them. But those are easy. Sometimes they're an easy change of I will submit a ticket instead of an email or something like that you can then track somewhere that says this is the communication style this team needs, and everyone in your team now knows, hey, if you're going to go to this team, make sure you submit a ticket. They work on a ticket queue or something like that, and that starts to build that relationship. And then when you bring on that new requirement that's not fun, they're less likely to come back and have a lot of questions.
Yeah, I've seen several times there's like maybe adoption issues with people don't want to just see a giant spreadsheet with 40 columns on it, right? But what we use forms and dynamic views. If a manager needs to see their stuff, we give them a dynamic view pivoted on only their stuff. So they don't have to see all the other manager stuff. They don't get, the clutter from it. And we work with the teams. Like, what is it that we need to do this function? Remember, we start with people and the process. So we cover with them, like, how do you need this communicated to this? How is it best for you to deliver it to us? And then we build something that works for that. And then, like Ricky hit on a strong point. Sometimes it's got to be done in a ticket. Well, Smartsheet's got a Jira connector. You've got ways to connect the data in such a way that you can make it happen and meet them where they are, right?
So one of the things I wanted to add on how do you create buy-in from those those other functions. The first thing that kind of comes to mind for me is it's leadership buy-in and understanding the impact. And what we're seeing, especially in kind of organizations that work with defense industrial base, is that adopting some of these compliance regulations there's a sense of urgency. This is important for businesses to do, because if they don't, they will not be eligible for other contracts, which means that their businesses will not continue to succeed. They'll lose out on other opportunities if they are not compliant. And compliance to the fullest extent, right? We are enhancing our security. And I think there's some messaging there that has to be from leadership, raising the urgency of it and the importance. and recognizing that, compliance actually can move into more of a competitive advantage for a lot of organizations if they're moving quickly into that, right? To say, hey, we're already compliant, we're already achieving this level of certification. It makes it that much easier for other firms to partner with, whether that's down the supply chains or other agencies, government agencies, to say, hey, we're going to use you, for our contracts.
Yeah, it takes communication. We have multiple meetings a month between the business, the security org, security and compliance, and the product and technology orgs, and you have to have buy-in at that top leadership, and everything else is driven from there.
Yeah, and a lot of things we come into is leadership will already know before the meeting because we've already communicated it, or they can self-serve themselves in some way. They're not asking you to forward that last communication to me, so I have the newest update. I'm going to go here, I'm going to get an idea at a high level what's going on. And then I ask you some questions where, someone, at my level, I want to know exactly what is the piece of evidence that's outstanding. Who do I need to escalate to? You can vary your communication style based on the audience you're actually trying to communicate to.
Yeah. That's actually a great topic. We just, like this week, we aired to the CTO a new report format. And what it is it's an extract of certain fields from our new, remediation / project management Smartsheet that we have all of the tasks, who's assigned to them, what they're doing, when it's due, whether or not they're on track, any escalations. And that feeds from a very spreadsheet format with Gantt charts and everything that a CTO doesn't want to look at into a straight up, Word documented format with, things like header information, set of milestones, and whether or not they're on track. And yeah, there's a little bit of manual manipulation on the final product, but 95% of it is pulled from our Smartsheet and put into there. So that way we don't have to have data consistency issues or spend a bunch of our cycles moving data around. Again, like we have to handle a lot of information constantly in order to do this communication right. If you're spending your time moving that information, you're spending less time on confirming requirements, helping with solutioning, or driving any other business communications like you're talking about. By doing it this way, we're able to focus on those things more with our constantly tight headcount and resources that we've got.
Yeah, letting the technology do what it's supposed to, right? To collect information, solve the tracking scenarios, and then let the people do the higher level thinking and solve the problems and collectively make those decisions. And I think that's kind of that's the overall goal, right? We're all trying to kind of support each other to do.
And then Lee had a question. Can Smartsheet facilitate a demand management process with the flexibility to accommodate different groups' needs and integrate some data into an enterprise system when appropriate?
I guess what I'll say that's the integration part. Yes, there's numerous integrations that my team uses a small amount, but obviously other teams outside of ours use a large amount to talk to any of those kind of systems to get that data in. I will say though, if you look at the template gallery, you'll see that Smartsheet is flexible enough to track or perform a lot of tasks out there that are, we can use it for compliance work, but you can also use it for tracking other things. So it may take a little, time to manipulate the product that you want it, but for at least my group, we seldomly, if ever, go outside of our product to try to perform a task that maybe another tool or another process was made for. But it's definitely flexible enough for us to be able to, we talked about policies, we talked about risk, we talked about, Justin touched on loan scan. I mean, you can hit a lot of different use cases, possibly with a little help setting it up from the beginning. But once you get it set up, you can adjust it for anything.
The only thing I'll add is that, oftentimes when you're pulling a lot of different data sources together, you want to just be certain that the business process, right, can stay consistent with that, and that it's allowing the right people to have that information, and not doing it just for the sake of trying to do it or trying to connect it. And I've seen some organizations not get the feedback that they want by connecting those. That said, there are API integrations that are out there. There are some of the custom wizard integrations that Smartsheet has to connect to others. And I know, other cloud-based platforms, have those APIs to be able to make those connections. And that's stuff that we've seen and then we've done in our organization as well.
And that's something else to mention, is that Smartsheet has an open API, and people here in the audience that I see today, I know have dived into that in the last week, even integrating different applications and even creating their own applications to meet the needs on an enterprise level. And just one thing, JP, would you mind touching on, like Justin mentioned, dynamic view? Just in
Yeah,
case
certainly.
people don't know.
Yeah, well, Justin, do you want to talk to it?
Yeah, well, it's one of the powerful tools that we use, because like I was saying in the example, sometimes you want to be able to get particular VP level management some information on what's going on in controls in their space, right? But you don't want to flood them with too much information. Well, you've got ownership columns, and we use dynamic views to pivot the information based on ownership. There's so many different ways you can use it, but basically it gives you control over what gets displayed, which fields get displayed, and to whom they get displayed. And we use that further because I don't just manage U.S. public sector. I also got French government. So I've got teams on my team that can see some information but not other information, and I've got to find some way to have the people who are cleared for everything to see everything, and the people who are cleared for certain things to be able to see certain things. Dynamic view facilitates that. We can have one all up back end, but we only give information to those folks who need it through the dynamic view.
Yeah, and that's different than just creating filters or just having the automated piece, right?
Yeah.
There is kind of more splicing that enables that to where they can't even access that data if they wanted to. And that's part of like enabling more of that security behind the scenes, right? And really what you want.
Right. The rest of the data isn't there. It's not like you're just masking columns, just only the information that you want to go into that dynamic view goes to that dynamic view.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome.
Well, we do want to be considerate of people's time. We know we're coming down to it. I can't thank you all enough. JP, if you want to say a couple closing words there.
Yeah, no, hey, really just appreciated the dialogue with Justin and Ricky. I think, again, for us at CORTAC, we always want to be just looking out broadly at the market and what we're seeing around collaboration work management and our expertise in compliance. So bringing this to light has been just helpful and hopefully informative for those in attendance. If you want to continue the conversation or are interested in kind of some of the solutions that we built out, happy to dive in with folks. Please feel free to reach out to me. My email's on the screen, and I know there'll be some follow-up emails after this as well.
Cool. Well, thank you. If we didn't get to your question live today, we will be following up afterwards. And then, like JP said, feel free to email him or us at usergroups@smartsheet.com, and we'll be happy to address any questions you have. Thank you. And thank you again, Justin, Ricky, and JP.
Thanks for having me.
Much.